You're listening to the A Bit From Within podcast with Felicia Marty. I guess that I wish I could be the kind of person that could be so easygoing that I could just fly anywhere at any point in time and just be super relaxed and that nothing would stress me out. But that's just not the truth of who I am. I felt so grateful once we landed in Denver. I was like, okay, we did it. We got through the worst of it. Now it's time to just kind of recover a little bit. And I know that I could probably do a better job at checking in and grounding ahead of time before I know something is going to be really stressful. That's an area of my life I need to invest a little bit more into. Hi there, everyone, and thank you so much for joining me for a new episode of the A Bit From Within podcast. I have to admit that I wish I was a little bit more prepared for today's episode, but I am not. I spent the weekend traveling to Chicago for my cousin's wedding. Dave and I were both doing videography for the wedding, so it was our first time traveling together with all of our gear, and especially for video. Now, there's a joke kind of mostly in the wedding industry that, photographers get to show up with a backpack and videographers show up with like a rolly cart filled with tons of bags and gear. And that is absolutely true for us. I have at most my big, huge backpack, and then sometimes I'll bring a styling kit with me, and usually my camera around my neck. And Dave has his backpack, but then he also has tons of tripods and light stands and a gimbal for like holding the camera in a monopod and different lights and the audio equipment, which is in different bags, and then cables and then chargers in case he has to charge the stuff to make it work. And so this was a huge trial run for us, as we've never traveled that way before. And we were just so excited to be able to go and do this for my cousin and of course be with family. And it was an amazing weekend. It went way too fast. I've never been to Chicago before. And I guess I'll just tell you a little bit about my trip. It started very early in the morning on Friday morning. We met my mom here at my house at 4:30 in the morning and went to the airport to catch our 7 a.m. flight to Chicago. And, Dave and I both had not had very much sleep. I was feeling so good on Thursday when we were packing. I had really set aside, I had caught up on work, and I was able to pretty much spend that entire day kind of focused on getting us prepared and packed and the house ready so that when we came back, it wasn't a disaster, that kind of stuff. And yet still, up until the last minute, it was up until 9 o'clock, we were still trying to pack and run around the house and get things and do things and make sure we didn't forget everything and think everything through. And so what turned into it felt like a very steady day until the very end. And then, little bits of anxiety about going and are we going to forget anything? And am I going to fall asleep? And then couldn't fall asleep. And all of that kept us up way too late. And then I thought, okay, well, maybe I'll just sleep on the plane. Well, that morning, as we were starting to go to the airport and get on the plane and everything, I just started getting this mounting sense of anxiety within me. And for those of you who have been following me for a long time, you guys know that I definitely struggle with anxiety attacks, and I can get very easily have a panic attack actually triggered because of anxiety, because I have, I guess to put it simply, I really struggle with feeling anxiety in my body and believing that it's normal. And so just feeling normal anxiety can cause me to have a complete panic attack and meltdown to the point where I am scared that I can't stay in my body, that I'm just going to pass out is my biggest fear, that I'm going to cause a scene in public, that I'm going to not be able to control myself. And then, of course, I'm sure there are just some fears around like death and dying and so that sort of thing, because that is how it feels when you have a panic attack, is that it is so scary that you feel like you're going to die. Like you are so scared that you feel like you're going to die. At least that's what it feels like for me. And so we got onto the plane, and my mom had gotten first, and she picked the row in the very front of the plane. And you can't have your bags with you when you sit in the very front row. And so we just rolled with it. We're like, yeah, that's perfect. That's fine. It's okay. I was like, I don't need anything in my bag. It's a short flight. It'll be fine. I mean, you can stand up and grab stuff out later. But so I just sat down, and you guys, it has been so long since I've been on a plane because of my work schedule and because of COVID, right? Like the last time I was on a plane was in 2018. Is that right? Yeah, I'm pretty sure that that's right. I'm trying to rack my brain right now. I'm pretty sure that was the last time I was on a plane, is when we went back to New York to visit Dave's family. And this has probably been the longest that I've gone without flying in my adult life, at least that I can remember. Like usually there's been at least one reason for me to travel a year or so. Like not like I'm a crazy traveler or anything, but I've been going pretty steadily, like for either a job or a vacation or whatever. And that was something that I've kind of been reflecting on too, is just when you're not in the practice of something, it creates a lot more anxiety. And maybe some of us are more predisposed to anxiety than others. I was always an anxious kid. I cried every time my mom left me anywhere. I was definitely that girl. I hated spending the night at people's houses. Like I have had to work through a lot of the things that make me anxious, because there are many of them. And that definitely drives me to stay in my comfort zone a lot of the time, or to look for things that have a really good reason for me to get outside of my comfort zone. So anyway, we are sitting on this plane. We're in the first row, and it's like my mom, me, and then Dave. And as we're sitting there, like I'm feeling extremely nervous and anxious, and I feel like I'm kind of trying to stay in my body, stay calm. Like I thought I'd just like sit there and close my eyes. And then about 30 minutes in, Dave has out of nowhere, he's like checking his Apple Watch. He has like the Apple Watch has like a heart rate monitor, and his heart rate just like skyrockets. Like it goes, like it's consistently going up. It's like 100, and then 120, then 150, and then 170. And he is freaking out. And I'm just like telling him, I'm like, hey, you're having a panic moment. Like, it's okay. You're okay. It's normal. You're okay. You just got to take a deep breath. It's going to come back down. And, I don't want to speak for him. Like, he has his own story or his own experience with this. I'll just say that I have grown up knowing what anxiety was, knowing what panic attacks are, what a lot of those symptoms are. And a lot of people don't know that. Like, it's one of the things that I feel so grateful for in my life, is that I had parents, but especially my mom who would help me identify, like, that's anxiety or that's panic or whatever. Like, anytime I was feeling certain things in my body, or if I was, just freaked out. And so it's a much more normal conversation for me, and it's easier for me to identify those things as panic. And, for him, I think that he was scared that there was something wrong with his heart. And it really freaked me out, to be honest, because I was so freaked out myself anyway, that having him freak out on top of it felt very hard for me. And like in the very moment it was happening, it was easy because I'm good in a crisis. So like I was able to kind of stop thinking about myself and just think about him and try to, get him to calm down. But then once his heart rate calmed back down, when you have a panic attack, your body is going to respond. Like, you're in a very severe state of fight or flight. And I remember some of the moments in my life where I've had very big panic attacks. You feel that fear that you really do get to a place afterwards where, you know, like, you can shake, like, you've got so much adrenaline running through you. You can feel exhausted. You can feel numb. You can feel scared. You could feel just kind of out of your body in general. And so he kind of just like held onto my arm, and I kind of just held him, and eventually, you know, he kind of calmed down. But then I think, you know, he was still thinking about it and feeling it. And then after that point, like, I was still freaked out and scared, and all I wanted to do was get off the fucking plane. Like, I just got to say it as it is. I just wanted to get off the plane. I was like, this flight needs to be over. And it felt like the clock was moving so slow. Like, to fly from Denver to Chicago is less than 2 hours both ways. And honestly, like, those are some of the shorter flights I've ever been on. Like, I'm usually, when I've traveled, it's been to a coast. So it's either a couple, like 2.5, 3 hours, or 4+, you know? So anyway, it ended up being just a pretty crappy mental experience being on that plane. And of course, this other thing that happens with anxiety that has been just really shitty for me is that once I experience something once, I'm afraid that I'm going to experience it again. It's been really hard for me lately to let go of what has happened once, especially when it comes to like the feeling of anxiety. So in the back of my mind, I'm like, oh my God, is this how it's going to be to fly every time now? Like, I'm going to be this level of stressed out and anxious. And I told Dave, I said, I'm sorry. Like, I don't know what's going on for you. I don't know if it is a panic attack. Like, I think you should call your doctor. You know, like, if you feel like once we get off, you want to go to urgent care, we can do that. He didn't end up going, but he did make an appointment with his doctor. But I was like, I think you're having a panic attack. And I said, unfortunately, I think you're a really empathetic person, and that you're picking up on some of what I have got going on, because I was genuinely very, very anxious, like to the point where I thought I was going to like throw up, which is kind of a newer, God, somebody knock on wood for me. It's been a new symptom recently, but something I hope does not stick around. And that kind of just kickstarted the experience of this weekend out of town, and it kind of started things off just a little rocky or kind of weird. And I tried to shake it off and let it go. You know, my sister, who moved to Florida earlier this year, she was also coming to the wedding, so she met us in Chicago. It was so good to see her. It's been like over a month since we last saw her, and because she just moved. And it was fun to see her and just try to spend time with other family. But it was such a short weekend. I mean, everyone was flying in like Friday, Saturday, or even Sunday. And of course, you know, one thing I just feel like does not get talked about enough, like I feel like I never hear people talk about this, are like the dynamics between like the family you create, like me and Dave, versus like the family that I have, like the family that I'm a part of, my immediate family. And even just integrating that, like I feel like my whole life I had this idea that like you meet somebody and you fall in love, and like your family is their family is your family, and like you're all just a part of like the same system. And don't get me wrong, like Dave gets along very well with my family, and my family loves Dave, and like it's cool. It's all good. There's no like bad juju or anything, but there's still dynamics, right? Like there's things that I think it's probably like different for your family to like have your dynamic with your other person like integrated into that dynamic, and then vice versa. Like I'm sure it's hard for Dave to be around my family with our dynamics. And so like taking that as like a vacation as the first time, like good for all those people out there who like that works really well for. But I would venture to guess that like it's a lot less common for it to be always 100% hunky dory. And instead, like there's some like it doesn't have to be bad, but just different dynamics that you have to face and kind of deal with. And for me, like, that was another like kind of part of the trip that was like a little bit exhausting. And it didn't help that we kind of arrived exhausted. But I will say, like, by Saturday night, like, everything was starting to feel much better, kind of like worked through those kinks. And it had me thinking about the fact that, like, sometimes things just take time. Like, sometimes you're going to just need time to come down from your panic attack or your anxiety attack. Sometimes you're just going to need time to readjust to traveling if you haven't traveled in a long time. Sometimes you're just going to need time to get used to a new city or your new surroundings, or like, hell, I've been living in my house for so long and only staying in Airbnbs that, like, being in a big fancy hotel, it was like hard to get used to like hotel air. I know that sounds probably so weird. I'm just trying to be as candid with you as possible about all of the things I just kind of was thinking about and dealing with on this trip. But I did try my best just to focus on what was really fun about being in the city. And for me, that was just walking around a lot, seeing the places that were close, like on foot. Like, we were right near Millennium Park, so we got to kind of see some of the like installations in the city, like the Chicago Bean and some of the other gardens. Just even appreciate like some of the restaurants that they had and the breakfast options and that sort of thing. It was really fun. And we were really lucky because we had amazing weather all weekend. And that's always a blessing whenever you're traveling. And then Sunday was my cousin's wedding, and we started the day really early, and it ended up being a wonderful and long day for us as videographers. But I'm so glad I would have had it no other way. Like, when you love what you do and you love telling wedding stories, to be able to tell those stories for the people that you really care about and that you appreciate and you feel like you can see, it's even more meaningful. And to be able to, I'm like dying to see all the footage. Dave has just been uploading it all day today, and I'm so excited to see how it all looks. I know we got some amazing stuff. And, there's always more stuff you wish you could do. I mean, Dave and I must have sat for like 2 hours being like, oh, I wish we would have gotten this and this and this and this. But that's how it is with every wedding. You can't be everywhere at once, and you also can never sacrifice like the couple and the family's experience on the wedding day for you to get what you need. It's a little bit of a balance. So we were kind of talking about that a little bit. But then we finished that night, and then Monday it was already time to travel home from Chicago. And I did try to build in a couple extra days after getting back from Chicago just for me to kind of have some downtime and readjust. But of course, that it only worked a little bit because my strategy for dealing with the plane ride back was a lot of self-talk. So I started on Sunday night, like already thinking about having to get on the plane on Monday and just thinking about, well, I tried just to be very rational. Like, what was going to be different about this trip versus the last one? I'm like, okay, I don't think that sitting on the very front of the plane was good for the anxiety, because you feel, at least for me in the plane that we were on, I could feel a lot more of the moving sensation of the plane from where we were at. Like, it felt, and then because you like had so much feet room, which I thought would be amazing, it actually though I think aided in the body anxiety, because like my body couldn't get comfortable because I couldn't like prop my legs up in a way I was used to on other plane rides. I guess, we didn't watch a movie or have, like, I did have my books to read on my phone, but I was too anxious at that point. Like, by the time I got on the plane, like, I was too anxious for the normal thing. And so I was like, I need to pre-frame this for myself so that by the time I get on the plane tomorrow, I'm feeling good in my body. Like, I'm excited. I know what to expect. I can walk myself through this. I can make sure that I'm fed and watered and in a good place mentally. And I was starting to feel a little bit of anxiety about if I was going to feel anxious. That's literally the freaking worst. It is the worst feeling in the world. And I told Dave like that next morning, I was like, hey, I'm really worried about you being anxious and me being anxious. And like, if I can handle you being so anxious, like it was a kind of hard conversation for us because obviously he can't control what he feels and what he's going through and all of that. So I had a small meltdown that morning because I was so afraid of being anxious. And I really think I just needed a release because the weekend had been so busy, so packed, so much people, so much energy. And honestly, I had not expected or planned for how exhausting that would be after this year of COVID, just how overwhelming that would feel. And that's not to say I would do anything differently. Like, is the parts that I'm commenting on that were hard for me do not negate from the fact of how good it was to see my cousins and my aunts and my uncle and people I haven't seen in years and be together with them for such a happy, beautiful event. Like none of that is taken away from the fact that like, as a person who spent a lot of time by herself or at weddings here, but where I can get in my car by myself and have hours back at my house to decompress, like it is different than being away in a different city, having literally so much, like hundreds of pounds of gear to carry around with you to get, in cars, in lifts, on and off of planes, like to travel around with all this shit. And it was just a lot. Like being around the people, traveling, COVID, everything made parts of this trip exhausting. And I'm really grateful that we did it because it is so good to look back and see where the wins were. And it was also so good to look back and see what it really took. So if we want to do this again in the future, like how much we need to charge to travel, that kind of stuff. I mean, it was overall such a win. Even Dave and I, like we had some moments where we were like really frustrated with each other. Like when I had my little mini meltdown the morning of the plane ride back, like I know he was frustrated with me. I was also feeling frustrated with him. But by the time we got to the airport, I just, I had this moment where I was like, Felicia, you're so tired. You've had a busy weekend. You don't need to be feeling anxious or stressed about anything now. Like everything that you need to take care of is done. You get to go pick up your dog from doggy daycare. Thank God. Like that was one of my like things that I was so excited to get home about, that I was just like, you get home, you get to pick up your puppy. Like you get home, you get to get Brad. So I was thinking about that. And then I just also had to have this moment where I was like, you know what? I have to trust my body right now. I am healthy. I have a strong immune system. Every time I've gone to the doctor, like they're constantly affirming me of like how healthy I am, how good my blood work is. I was just thinking about all the times in my life that my body has carried me through, whether it's been every other plane ride I've ever been, or even the moments that I've been anxious, like getting me back out of that. And every time I've had a cold, I've healed. Every time I've been sick with a bug, I've healed. Every time I've experienced, like a trauma, like I had to have a reconstructive ankle surgery when I was 18, like even when that was failing me, like I found the right doctors to help me heal that. My body has come through over and over and over again. And it was time for me. In that moment, I felt like I could try my best to lean into that and be like, I am strong. My body is strong. I can do this. I can get through this. I am in a good place is what I kept saying, because I felt it even though I was doubting it. I did feel like I'm in a good place. I could feel that in my body. I don't know if that makes sense, but it was much different than how I felt on Friday morning. And so we got on the plane and we had a great plane ride. And, I just felt so grateful once we landed in Denver. I was like, okay, we did it. We got through the worst of it. Now it's time to just kind of recover a little bit, try to get all this stuff home, get back home, and also try not to have all these feelings around, I'm like, am I too old for this? Like, am I just not an air traveler? And it's really tough because I guess that I wish I could be the kind of person that could be so easygoing that I could just fly anywhere at any point in time and just be super relaxed and that nothing would stress me out. But that's just not the truth of who I am. The truth of who I am is that I've got some anxious stuff going on, especially when it's outside of my norm. I've got this perfectionistic thing where I like to know exactly what to expect of myself. And when I go through these experiences, like packing for the first time for this trip and doing this thing that I've never done before with my partner, with my family, it was stressful. And I guess I'm having to have this moment where I acknowledge that about myself, and instead of feeling shame or frustration or whatever, it's just this place of acceptance. And I also think that anytime I feel something like this, or you feel something like this, these are moments where we can take a little bit of an inventory around, okay, what tipped the scale over the edge? What would have made it a little bit more balanced? What would have made it better? And I've been thinking a lot about this because Dave and I have another trip in less than 6 weeks for another wedding in Maine this time. And I've got to really figure out, like, what are things that I would do differently for next time? Well, at least luckily, no offense to my family, but they're not invited to this trip. So, like, I don't have to deal with any of the family dynamic. It's like Dave and I just get to go do our thing. So I think that'll make it easier. 2, we just did it, so we know more of what to expect, especially in terms of what to pack and all of that. 3, it's a much different kind of situation where we're picking up a rental car, and so we won't be in and out of lifts all day, every day. And I think that will be much more comfortable of an experience overall. It'll be like just a little bit more in control of our vacation and our trip, and our work experience. A car is kind of like a safe place to go to. So I think that'll help also. And yeah, just, I guess, being a little bit more experienced, like having just done it, that part will also help. So, and I'll have to reflect on that a little bit more too. Just, one of the things that Dave and I were talking about this morning is, well, panic attacks, right? And, he was kind of trying to I think he's in the place of trying to figure out, like, what am I going through? Why is my body going through this? And I think this is the first time in his life where he's really ever experienced a panic attack, because the difference I feel like with panic attacks is, like, sometimes a panic attack will come out of nowhere. It's not always a trauma response to something that is happening, right? It's not like you go through something hard and then you have a panic attack. And I think that that's a lot of times the misconception about it. Is like a panic attack really can come out of nowhere. But one of the things that he said is, like, I'm really excited just to talk to my doctor and figure it out, because if I can know that my body is in a good place, then maybe I can self-talk myself a little bit easier. And I had to relate to that, because it is much easier when you get to that place. Like, even when I was on the plane yesterday, if I had like little moments of anxiousness, like my heart started kind of beating as the plane was taking off. And I'm like, I had to tell myself, like, that's a normal reaction to what's happening. Like, you're on a metal, plane flying through the sky, about to fly through the sky. It is normal to have a little bit of a faster heartbeat right now. There is a normal amount of anxiety. It is normal. And I had to keep affirming that for myself. Like, it is normal to feel a little anxious right now. This feeling will pass. Your body is strong. It can withstand this level of anxiety for a little while, and then you will calm back down. And I think that's such an important piece of managing anxiety. That is something that I'm learning more about after how long of dealing with anxiety. I'm learning those skills of self-talk a little bit better. And I'm hoping that I can keep up with that. But I also know that like every anxious situation is a little bit different. And I know that I could probably do a better job at checking in and grounding ahead of time before I know something is going to be really stressful. That's an area of my life I need to invest a little bit more into, because sometimes we forget to do that. Like sometimes we get so swept up in the excitement and the action of what's happening that we forget to prepare ourselves fully. And some of that preparation needs to be mental preparation, right? We can't sacrifice the mental preparations that we need to go through what we're going to go through. As much as we can prepare, right? And the other thing that I've just been thinking about is how many of us are struggling to stay in our bodies right now. Whether it's the COVID stuff or being out of practice with socializing or just stuff going on in our own life that have things up for us right now. It's a really daunting time. And I know for me, especially after watching Dave go through that panic attack and feeling so much of the anxiety myself, I just thought, I really wish that I had a meditation that would just help me be in my body, that can help me remember some of that self-talk that I was feeling this weekend when I was feeling more confident, when I was feeling like I could get myself through it, and capture that somehow so that I could remember it for when I wasn't feeling that way. And so I did spend some time right before I sat down to record today's podcast episode to record a meditation for my Patreon this week. And I didn't go in with an exact theme other than something to help people stay in their bodies, no matter what they're going through, whether you're facing depression or anxiety or maybe an illness. Maybe you're dealing with some thyroid stuff or some brain trauma or something else. Maybe you have come down with a cold or a virus or just anything that you could be going through where you're feeling a little bit of a disconnect from your body, even a little bit of a frustration. I think anxiety is a really big piece of that, like where you're feeling that disconnect from your body and maybe even frustration that your body is feeling so anxious. Just to help you bring it back down, help you accept it. And a big piece of the meditations that I like to do and encourage is just those reminders that it's not a light switch, right? Like you don't just sit down, do a meditation, then instantly you feel better. Like sometimes it takes time. Sometimes you just move that needle a little bit. And there's nothing wrong with feeling frustration or overwhelm or heaviness, but can you find a bit of a moment of gratitude or trusting yourself or calm? And that's what I tried to capture in that meditation. So if any of this has resonated with you, if what I just said makes sense to you, I would love for you to check out the Patreon. You can join for $6 a month and get access to all guided meditations. I have a ton of them. Or $12 a month to get access to the yoga classes that I put out. They're gentle yoga classes of all different kinds. And then we have an $18 a month level too that actually includes live classes. It's once a month where we actually have a connection with everybody beforehand. And it's all over Zoom. So very safe going into this kind of, third wave of COVID that we're having, but also just really flexible no matter where you are, no matter what you have going on in your life with your schedule. It's a great, great way to connect. And amazing people are part of the Patreon. I know some of you are listening right now. I love you. I'm so grateful for you. And I would encourage anybody else who's finding this to check it out. Later this week, I'll also be releasing the full moon guide. So it'll be on my Patreon, sent directly to all those members. But then I also will put it up on my website. So if you want to check it out, the full moon guide for this full moon coming, it is a full moon in Aquarius on the 22nd. So second full moon in Aquarius while we're still in Leo. And we're getting ready to move to sun sign in Virgo next week. So lots of little shifts happening. I'll talk about that a little bit more next week. So In the meantime, thanks so much for tuning in. I hope that somehow a bit of my story has resonated with a little bit from within you. Oh, let's do a card drawing real quick before I completely sign off. I've got my card deck right next to me. And you guys know I love ending each episode with a card drawing, something from the universe that can help kind of tie a bow on our episode. This week I've got Tasha Silver's Wild Offering Oracle deck. And I've pulled this card that's called Patience. You can imagine that it's a card that I'm very familiar with. It says, if you've tried forever to shift a problem, there's probably something to learn from embracing it. May I let this be for now. Help me relax and trust that every need will be met. Often change soon follows. If that isn't a poster card for anxiety, then I don't know what is, because that really is how it can be. It's like if you're trying so hard to shift it, it's like, what is there from just allowing yourself to sit with it? It's been one of the biggest things that's helped me with my panic attacks, is just a little bit of self-talk around, I'm feeling anxious and this is uncomfortable, but it is not the end of the world. I'm not dying right now. I'm experiencing discomfort, feeling a lot of feelings, just trying to name it, feel it in my body, but also just reminding myself, I'm normal, change is going to follow soon. Let me just sit with this. Let this be. Anything that's causing me problems, just let me breathe. It'll be okay. I love that. And sometimes we have to be patient with whatever we're going through. So, all right, you guys, that's it for now. Until next time.